Okay. All right, y'all. I did not plan to go live tonight. I actually wanted to sit down and record my recent birth experiences and upload it later. But the way your girl's storage is acting up right now, it wasn't even possible. I am going to sit down and share on this live about my most recent birth experiences, both with my second and my third um, children, second and third babies, children, whatever it is, however you say that. This is live, so there's no editing, there's no cut scene or anything. So whatever I say, it is what it is. But I do want to preface this live by saying that it can be a trigger for some people who may either be pregnant or may have had their own traumatic experiences. So I do want to preface this live by saying that. So, trigger warning, if you're pregnant, I don't necessarily recommend you watch this. If I were pregnant, I probably would not watch this if somebody else were sharing their birth experiences. If you are pregnant, by all means, please click out of this. I don't want to trigger anyone in a negative way. But let's jump right in. So, I actually shared or recorded my birth experience with our firstborn, Judah. Beautiful experience, had him at a birth center, and it was definitely what I was praying for and what I was walking in expectation for when it came to my second and my third um, children. I can't figure out how to say that. Second and third born, I guess. Firstborn, second and third born. Okay, second and third born, right? Um, that's not exactly how it happened. That's not exactly how it happened. And that's why I titled this live Beauty in the Traumatic Experiences, because though both experiences were traumatic in their own separate ways, there still was beauty in both experiences, in both of the stories. There was a testimony in both of them, okay? And the Most High still came through and showed his hand in both experiences. I don't know. I think it's so important to hear all kinds of birth stories and just have like a balanced perspective. Because oftentimes we can talk about the beautiful stories, right? Like my first experience was so beautiful. It was very much like a supernatural experience, and it's on my YouTube channel if you have not seen it yet. And then these other two experiences were not the same. I don't know. I understand some people like to be super optimistic about it, so they don't like to watch negative or hear about negative birth experiences. And I respect that. I definitely understand that as well. And I kind of err on that side as well. But I think also like life is life, and just the reality is that sometimes things don't go as planned and they don't go as expected. So I think stories like this can also be beneficial for people who may have not had the experience that they had hoped for, or that they had prayed for, or that they were walking in expectation for. So, anyways, let me jump into this story. So, I'm going to start with our second born, Levi, because I never recorded his birth story, which is so crazy. He will be 3 tomorrow. And I am just now sitting down and like talking about his birth experience. And not because I was like avoiding it, or maybe I was subconsciously and didn't even realize it. But life has just been crazy since we had our second born. And so this is the first time I've actually been able to like really sit down and record. So we found out we were pregnant with our second born right around the time that the pandemic had hit. So it was a crazy time. It was a crazy time. And thankfully, by the time we were getting further along in our pregnancy, um, like my husband was at least able to come to the ultrasounds, because when the pandemic first hit, people that were pregnant were struggling. Like dads couldn't even come to ultrasounds. Like I remember my heart went out to so many families who were, or moms who were going to the ultrasound, and like their husband or dads had to like FaceTime in to be able to see their baby on the ultrasound. So thankfully, by the time we came around, my husband couldn't come to like the standard appointments, but he was able to at least come inside for the ultrasound. So he came in for the ultrasounds, and It was a crazy time. It was a crazy time in the world, social distancing. I had a toddler at home. I had just started working from home because I was working in the field as a therapist, but obviously with the pandemic, we came home. And so, being home with a toddler, trying to navigate being a new stay-at-home mom, not being able to have people come over and like help me with the baby because of social distancing. Um, my husband was in his second master's program, so he was writing a thesis. We were preparing to transition with the military. Like there was just so much going on in that season that pregnancy was very difficult for me. I was not moving my body and life was just crazy. We also had sold our house at that time. We downsized to an apartment. Like it was just a lot. So by the time it came around when I was getting ready to give birth, we were supposed to be having our son at a birth center. That was the plan, right? We had a birth center birth the first time around, and we were expecting another beautiful supernatural experience at a birth center again. This birth center was about an hour away from our house because the birth center that we had our first son at had actually shut down. So we had to find another birth center that we could have our second born at. And so we did. It was about an hour away. Well, baby boy decided that he was going to be 2 weeks and 2 days overdue, y'all. It was crazy. I was 42 and 2 when I gave birth to our second son. And I think part of that was because I was sitting around, I wasn't moving my body, I wasn't doing what I should have been doing on my end. And so I remember on the Friday before he was born, we went to the birth center. We were trying to do everything that we could to get him to come. He was not coming. Everything that we could do naturally. I tried all the tips and tricks, all the tips and tricks. Like had sex, did everything. Nothing was working. He was not coming. He was comfortable in there. And so we went to the birth center that Friday and we did what was called a midwife induction, which is where they give you like castor oil mixed up in some like drink. You drink it, and at least how this birth center did it, you drink the castor oil, and then like a few hours later, it's like accompanied with some herbs and tinctures and stuff like that. I did the castor oil part, but when it came down to doing like the herbs and the tinctures, that's where I had to opt out. Um, you got to be careful. Like some aspects of like the birth community can be very like new age and just on some different stuff, right? And so I remember when the midwife brought us like the different herb bottles, it was like, okay, this is the next part of the midwife induction. You take these herbs, and the herbs plus like the castor oil is supposed to get your body going naturally. And I just remember seeing my husband in my peripheral vision. I remember seeing him pull his phone out. And immediately I was like, he's pulling his phone out so that he can research like the companies behind these herbs. I already knew it. And as soon as she walked out, I looked over at him. He was like, girl, you ain't taking no herbs. Like, And when we were like looking at the website and just kind of doing our research, whoever makes the herbs, like the company, she was like, she talks to the sun and she talks to the moon and she talks to all of these different people and the ancestors to like put the remedies together for these it was just a lot of stuff, and I was like, I can't, no, like I can't put that in my body right now. I just didn't trust it, right? Obviously, like I'm pregnant and I'm trying to birth my son, and so I'm I don't want to be spiritually open to just anything and anyone, right? So we ended up telling the midwife like, hey, we're gonna opt out of the herbs, so like I'm just not comfortable taking them. And thankfully she was really supportive. She was like, okay, like she didn't ask why, nothing, right? It was just like, okay. Um, so that part of the midwife induction we didn't do. And could I have gone into labor naturally had I done it? Maybe. I don't know, right? We'll never know. But it wasn't a risk I was willing to take. So we tried a few more things. And on that Friday, he just would not come. So that meant I had to go back home, drive an hour. And at that point, the midwife was like, it's up to you. She was like, well, you can keep trying. Like, no one's gonna make you do anything you don't want to do here at the birth center. She was like, but the other option is we can go to the hospital tomorrow and do a medical induction. And I did not want to do that, y'all. But I was 2 weeks and 2 days overdue with this baby, and I was exhausted. And so I was like, okay, like I think I'm just ready to go ahead and do a medical induction. Now, had you asked me like a few months ago or even like a year ago, would I still have gone forward with that induction? I would have said no. I would have waited a little bit longer and just kind of like just to see what my body would have done naturally. But after having my daughter recently, which will probably be like part two, And that being like another traumatic experience. I don't know. We'll talk about it. We'll get there. But I ended up going to the hospital the next day early that morning. So we went home and then came back out, got to the hospital early the next morning to start the medical induction. The nurses were great because a lot of the nurses, that hospital in particular, was very connected to the birth center that I was supposed to birth at. So a lot of the nurses at the hospital actually gave birth at the birth center. So they had a very good working relationship with the midwives at the birthing center. And the midwife that was scheduled to deliver my baby at the birth center transitioned over with me to the hospital. So it was a really great setup and connection. It wasn't like the doctor at the hospital had to deliver the baby. I still got to keep my midwife. I still saw familiar faces. So it was good. I knew I was in good hands. Um, the day goes on. We've tried everything that we can to get him to come naturally. We tried the Foley bulb. We tried the Cytotec pill. Like we tried all of these different things and nothing worked, y'all. The last resort was Pitocin, which I was trying to avoid, but it just came to the point where the boy wouldn't come. And so I was like, okay, let's try the Pitocin. Y'all, I don't know what is going on in my body, like what is going on here, but they maxed me out on Pitocin. They started at the lowest level possible and then they continued to take it up. And I remember sitting there like, is it on? Like, what are we doing? Like, what what's wrong with me? Why is my body not responding? And nothing happened. Nothing happened. It just my body just did not react to it. I had like a few contractions, but nothing major. And at this point, y'all, this is 42 and 2. I'm 2 weeks and 2 days overdue. I was like barely dilated, barely effaced, like nothing was happening with my body. I don't know what was going on. And it wasn't until later that night, Saturday night, I was eating dinner and my husband was sitting on the couch. I was in the bed eating and I was on the phone with my dad. And I remember my water broke. And I was like, oh my God, my water just broke. And my dad is on the phone. He's panicking. And for those that don't know, my dad is incarcerated. So this is actually like a very special moment. The fact that like my water broke with him on the phone because he's been incarcerated since I was probably, I think, 3, right? So majority of my life. And so he's missed a lot of all of the experiences I've ever had, right? So it was very special that he was actually on the phone when this happened. And I remember Nate ran out to the midwives and to like the nurse station and was like, her water just broke, her water just broke. And they were so excited. They were like, yes, let's go. Like it's showtime. And so I'm like, okay, finally, like things are happening. We texted my doula and was like, hey, the water just broke. And it like it kicked up, y'all. Within like minutes, my body just it revved up and those contractions were hitting hard. Within 20 minutes, I was in the tub like trying to labor because I'm trying to do this naturally. I have not had an epidural or anything like that. So I'm in the tub and I'm laboring and my not my midwife, my doula had texted and was like, hey, like, do you want me to come over? And I think we didn't respond because I was already laboring and things had picked up so fast that she just went ahead and came on. By the time she got there, I was like in the tub, like, like, like feeling it, and my body even started pushing at this point. And so everyone's getting excited. Everyone's getting excited. My dad's off the phone by this point, and it was beautiful too. I appreciate the nurses and the midwives because they could tell he was on the phone, so they would turn up like the baby monitor so that he could hear the baby's heartbeat, things like that, which I know meant the world to him. And so just a little bit later, I'm like in the bed and I'm laboring this baby down. I'm like on all fours trying to get baby to come down. And things are going good. Things are going good. We're progressing. They're like within the next hour or so, baby should be here, right? And it was probably like I think it was the last 6 minutes of pushing, things were stalling up. Things were stalling, and I was like, okay, like still pushing. And they're like, Samantha, you got to give it your all. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm giving it my all. I don't understand like why this baby is not coming out yet. And I remember my midwife, at one point, I remember her saying, hey, I'm just going to invite a few more people into the room. Not thinking anything of it at the time. I was like, oh, okay, a few more people are coming in. In hindsight, I remember sitting there and I'm pushing, and I remember the lights are like turning on. It's like a stadium, like the lights pop on, about 10 people are in the room. And I'm like, where are all these people coming from? Like, what is going on right now? But it still didn't click to me, like, obviously, what was happening. She was very calm. The nurses were still calm. Nate was beside me. He's still really calm. And so I'm like, okay, I'm still pushing. And about a minute or so later, she says, Samantha, like this baby needs to come out right now. And she said, if you can't push the baby out, she said, I'm gonna have to cut. And I was like, who cut and what? No, y'all, I don't know what came over me, but I was like 2 pushes later and that baby came out. And he came out, and I remember when he came out, the midwife was like, put him on her chest, put him on her chest, let her get some skin to skin. And they put the baby on my chest. They put my baby boy on my chest. And I'm thinking like, okay, it's over. Golden hour. I'm ready to like embrace my baby and just hug on him and snuggle him. And as soon as I like hold him and like kissed him, they like snatched him away. And I was like, where my baby at? Like, what's going on? And so I was like, what? Like at this point, I'm lost now because I still don't really understand like what's happening. And I remember the midwife was like, baby just needs a little bit of help. Baby needs some help right now. And I was like, okay. And so at this point, Nate's beside me. He goes over to the other table where they have the baby now. And I'll probably have to do like some type of follow-up of like just different pictures and videos of that day, the little bit that we do have, and like have Nate kind of share his standpoint. But I remember him telling me like he went over to the table. He felt led to go over to the table because at first he was by my side supporting me. He was like, but like literally the Lord had laid it on his heart to like go over to the table and to call Levi's name. So he went over to the table and he laid his hand on Levi. He was like, the Lord told me, like, lay my hand on him. And he laid his hand on him and he called his name. And one of the nurses tried to stop him. She was like, sir, you can't touch him. Like, you need to back up. And he looked at her and he was like, I'm praying. And it wasn't like a, hey, can I pray? It was a, I'm praying. I'm not asking no questions. Like, I'm praying. And she was about to kind of like object and, kind of fight back a little bit. But another nurse recognized him, was like, hey, just let him pray. Like, it's fine. And so he laid his hand on Levi and spoke to him and was like, Levi, this is your father. Like, just began praying over him, just declaring life over him. And within the minute, Levi's hand flinched, right? And they got a heartbeat because he wasn't responding at that point. And at that point, the nurse was like, "Oh yeah, keep talking, Dad. What's his name? What's his name?" Like the same one that was like, "Don't touch him, back up," is now like, "Oh, okay, Dad, keep going. Yeah, keep going. What's his name?" And so this point, they are able to resuscitate him, and he's breathing. And so I'm still laying in the bed trying to understand what's happening because I still don't really get it. I just know my baby's over there. He's not in my arms. I'm confused. And at this point, they're like, hey, we need to take him to the NICU. Like, he's okay, but we just need to monitor him a little bit. And I'm like, okay. And I remember Nate looking at me like he didn't know what to do. He didn't know whether to stay by my side or to go with the baby. And in my mind, I'm like, go with the baby. Like, I'm good. At least I thought I was, right? I was like, go with the baby. It's fine. I'm good. I'm good. And so he was like, okay. But the look on his face was like looking back at it now, he was looking at me like he didn't know how to part ways with me. And I'm confused because I'm like, I'm good. Go. Like, I'm good. So he leaves. He goes with the baby like I asked him to. And I'm sitting there like, okay, well, what next? Like, not understanding that we still have a whole situation on our hands. And the midwife looks at me and she was like, Samantha, you're losing a lot of blood. And I was like, okay, like, still not understanding, like what really is happening. And so she said, you're losing a lot of blood and there's a lot of clots in you right now. And she said, I need to put my hand in there and I need to get those clots out. And I remember looking at her. To this day, I will never forget. I looked at her and I said, your hand or your fingers, right? Because like, not being TMI, like we're used to vaginal checks, right, during pregnancy. So I'm thinking vaginal check, fingers make sense, right? But she was like, no, I need to put my hand in there and get those clots out. And I'm like, your hand. And I remember looking, I was like, girl, you got a big hand. What you mean you need to put your hand in there? Like, her hand was big. I'm like, what you mean you need to put your hand in there? And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm thinking we got time. So I'm like, well, give me some time to think about it and process. And she's like, there's no time. Like, I need to do this right now or we're going to have to take you to the OR. And so y'all know me, like I try to be as natural as possible. Like I try to go the natural route as much as I can. But when she said her hand had to go inside of me to get those blood clots out, I'm like, well, take me to the OR because maybe they got some medication, something to knock me out over there. Like I want to be over there. I don't want to do this. Because mind you, I still have not gotten an epidural, so I can feel everything. And so she looked at me like, Samantha, we don't have time. Like, I need to do this right now. Like, you are losing a lot of blood right now. And I was like, is she serious? And I said, well, can I get some time? Like, mind you, I'm still trying to negotiate as though I am not like losing all of this blood, y'all. And as though my life is not on the line. I'm like trying to negotiate. Now, in hindsight, I'm like, girl, you was crazy. You could have died on that table and you up there trying to negotiate. Could you get some more time? Again, not realizing how bad the situation was. And so she was like, Samantha, we got to move now. I've got to do this now. And so I was like, all right. And I remember one of the nurses was like, look, girl, she was like, I know you like to be natural. I'm with you. She was like, but this right now, like, we don't have time. We've got to move now. Like, we need you to let us do this now. And I'm like, okay, all right, I guess, right? Y'all, I held on to the bed, to the handles on the bed. Whew, I will never forget. She had to insert her hand. Again, as I preface this video, trigger warning for anybody that does not need to listen to this or does not want to hear this. But she had to go in and she was pushing on my stomach, pushing and pulling the clots out. Y'all, I lost it on on the bed. I could have hit that lady in her face on that day. When I'm telling you, everything rose up in me, and it took like constraint to not hit her, because I was like, oh, you're crazy. I'm about to knock you out. Move back up. And I literally had to tell her, I said, back up, like, don't touch me. Just back up. Just back up. And I remember she was like, I understand, like, but like, I can't. I need to get the clots out like right now. And I was like, I need time. Like, so now I'm arguing with her. I'm like, I need time. I need time. And she's like, we don't have time. We don't have time. And so I was like, this lady's crazy. She's crazy. And I'm like, and everybody's like, Samantha, we've got to go. We've got to go. Even my doula was like, girl, come on, And so I'm like, all right, like, go ahead. So I'm bracing again, and she's pushing. Mind you, I just pushed out a baby, a 10-pound baby. I think Levi was almost 10 pounds. So my joint is already on fire, okay? And then here you come with your hand pulling out blood clots and like pushing on my stomach. It was so, it was an experience, y'all. And I remember she got out as much as she could. And next thing I know, the OR was coming in the room, the doctors from the OR. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what is going on? And so then they're like, we just want to double check. They had to do like an ultrasound to make sure everything was out. And I'm like praying, like, Lord, please let everything be out, because I don't know if I can do this again. And of course, everything wasn't out. So then the OR doctor was like, I'm sorry, sweetie, like, I need to get in there and get some more out. So now getting it out, just going, and I'm like losing it. And then in the back of my mind, I still have my baby in my back of my mind. Like, is he okay? Is he, you know what I'm saying? Like, is he fine? Like, what is going on? And it took him a while. It took him a while to get all of the clots out. And eventually, like, they were like, okay, but like, we think we got everything out. We're going to have to do some more checks throughout the night and, throughout the next day or so. But we think we at least got all the clots out. And I remember just sitting there in that room, like, what just happened? I had this beautiful experience with my firstborn. I expected, I walked by faith for the second one. I just knew it was going to be the same thing. Like, it just, like, I was trying to process, like, what literally just happened. I still don't know what's going on with my baby. I think finally one of the nurses came in and was like, hey, is it okay if we give the baby some donor's milk? Like, we asked your husband, but he said he didn't know, and he wanted us to ask you because he said you're very picky about like what the baby can have. And so, like, is it okay if we give the baby donor's milk, or we can do formula? And I said, no, I prefer donor's milk. That's fine. Thank you for asking, And the room was just quiet. I like, no one knew what to say. My doula was just sitting there, and she didn't know what to say. I don't know what to say. The nurses don't know what to say. Like, it was just so much, y'all. It was so much. And by God's grace, Levi went into the NICU, and they said he was going to be in there like at least a week or two or something like that. And they were like, you can come and visit him. And let me tell you, the God that I serve, though, okay? I had my son a little bit after midnight. that Saturday. So it was really Sunday, Sunday early in the morning, like 12:30 a.m. Sunday morning. And my baby and I were reunited, I think by like 3 or 4 o'clock that afternoon. Right. So they said it was going to be like a week or two. And my baby boy was in my arms that Sunday afternoon at like 3 o'clock. And it was an intense road to recovery. Postpartum was very difficult for me. That experience for Nate was very traumatic as well. And again, we'll have to do some type of montage of like the videos and pictures. I'll have to censor some of it because obviously I was like naked in some of it. But for him, it was very traumatic. It was very traumatic because, I mean, there's one part where, your child comes out, they're not breathing. And then you see God do a miracle on the table and you lay your hands on your child and you pray over that child and they come back to life. But now you have your wife who's on the bed and she's bleeding out. And that was the part that was difficult. It made sense in hindsight why he was looking at me like, do I stay with you or do I go with the baby? And to me, I'm like, it's a no-brainer. Go with the baby, because I didn't understand the state that I was in at that time. But in hindsight, like having that conversation with him, he was like, that was a traumatic, like I wanted to stay with you, but I was also concerned for the baby. But my concern and my fear was going to be with the baby and coming back and my wife was going to be dead. And so that was very traumatic for him. And that was something that took him a little while to like shake off and kind of come to terms with. And we were in the NICU for a few more days just to make sure baby was fine, to make sure I was fine. It took me a while to heal. I know some people have asked, like, did I have any tear or anything like that? It's interesting. I had a very minor tear. So minor that I ended up just healing naturally. They didn't give me any stitches or anything. The pain medication that I had, I think it was like basic pain meds. It wasn't anything intense. My body just had to do what it needed to do. And so even after we were discharged from the hospital, we were back home. We were back home with our now 2-year-old. And so it was difficult because again, my husband was in his second master's program. He was writing a thesis. So he kind of had to like be thrown back into like school and providing for our family. We were, preparing for a military transition as well at that time. So it was really intense having had that experience. And then the lack of, I guess, support in the postpartum journey, again, because we're still in the middle of this pandemic. So we're having to be cautious and careful. It was intense. I dealt with a lot of postpartum anxiety and depression. Even like suicidal thoughts was very, very intense after that postpartum experience or during that postpartum experience. And even so much so that my husband was leaving for military training a couple months or so after we had our son. And it was agreed upon that I would go stay with like a family friend, because it just wasn't safe for me to be by myself with both babies. That's how unstable I was, and just not feeling good, not feeling myself, and not feeling healthy. And so it was difficult. It was very difficult. Levi bounced back really well. Like he bounced back fine, completely fine. And as I wrap this up, the one thing that I have learned, y'all, is and this is something we say now, is to trust God in the delays. Trust Him when your plans don't go as you had anticipated or as you had expected, right? So we had planned to have him at the birth center, but because he was overdue, we ended up having this induction at the hospital. Now, anyone that has, a baby at a birth center knows if there's an emergency at the birth center, they call in an emergency to the hospital and say like, hey, we're en route to come to you guys. Because birth centers are very low risk, right? So the moment something is escalated and there's a serious need for more intervention, they can no longer provide you care. They have to transfer you into a hospital. Well, as fast as things happened with the end of, that birth experience, right when we were pushing, because literally it was like the last 6 minutes, who's to say we would have made it to the hospital in time? Right? Who is to say? As fast as it happened, it was literally like within seconds, it was like, what just happened? We were good. And now all of a sudden, and what happened, I don't think I said this. What happened was as he was coming down the birth canal, his head or his neck got stuck in the umbilical cord. And so that's why he wasn't coming out. So when they were like, Samantha, push, give it everything you got, I'm like, I'm pushing. Something's not right. And it was that he had got stuck in the umbilical cord, and that's why he wasn't coming out. And so I'm saying that to say, like, had we had him at the birth center as we planned, had we had him at the birth center as we had anticipated, who's to say we would have made it to that hospital in time, right? I could have died having the situation that had happened, or he could have died, right? And so, as much as I wanted to have him at that birth center, as much as I had prayed for that, with everything that happened, it just didn't happen. And I think at some point, there comes a time to fight, and then there comes a time when you have to surrender, and you have to say, you know what, Lord, like, is this you in the delays? Is this you in the interruptions or in the hiccups, right? We see it as hiccups, we see it as inconveniences, but maybe it's the Most High trying to protect us from something, or maybe it's the Most High trying to grant us something. And so in that moment, I wanted that birth center birth. But in hindsight, I'm like, well, thank God I didn't have him at the birth center, right? And this is not to say like I fear birth center births or anything like that. Like, my next baby, I still want a birth center birth. And I know people will think that is crazy. I don't walk by fear, you know. But I'm just saying to trust the Father in those delays, trust him when those experiences arise, because you just don't know. And even with Levi being 2 weeks and 2 days overdue, when he went to the NICU, because he was like overdue, because he had that extra time to bake, right? Like bake in the womb, right? Or bake, you know what I'm saying? Like bake, like he was able to bounce back faster than they had anticipated. So had he been like a premature baby, or had even maybe been like a baby that came right on time, he may have not been able to bounce back as quickly as he did. But it was because he had that extra time to bake that he was able to bounce back a little better. So again, I'm uncomfortable. I'm frustrated in those last 2 weeks, because I'm like, this is not making sense. Why am I like over my due date by 2 weeks and I'm still pregnant? Like, it's just not making sense. Again, like, trust the Father in delays, trust him in the hiccups, trust him in the plans that don't go as you had anticipated, because you don't know what he's protecting you from. You don't know what he's granting you, right? So just learning to trust him no matter what the situation looks like. And so I pray that this encourages somebody out there, and maybe you're just interested in hearing about this birth experience. But if anything, I pray to be able to leave you guys with just the understanding of like, there's beauty that can come from traumatic experiences. There is beauty that can come from experiences that don't go again as planned or as anticipated. And some people have asked, like, hey, do you fear, like I said, a birth center birth, or are you scared of having children moving forward? The honest truth is no. I am not. I'm cognizant of what happened. And I'll have to do like a part two to share my daughter's birth experience, which is our most recent experience. She's 9 months now. So we had her 9 months ago. And that was another traumatic experience, unfortunately. But again, like, there was beauty in that. And the Father met us even in that experience, and even in our postpartum journey, like, he met us there. And so I'll share that at another time. But I don't fear having children moving forward. I still want more babies. Call me crazy. I still want more babies. And I don't even fear having like a birth center birth. I actually wanted another birth center birth with my daughter, but was not able to because of the location of the birth center. It was just too far away from our house. And so we had her at a hospital. And so yeah, I don't fear. I really don't fear. Again, I'm cognizant of how things can go. I'm cognizant of how situations and emergencies can arise, but I just refuse. I refuse to allow fear to control me. I refuse to allow fear to be what, you know what I'm saying? Like, what I base my decisions off of as it pertains to my life, as it pertains to our family, growing our family, et cetera, et cetera. So no, I don't fear having children moving forward. I don't regret any experience, or, it definitely, it was difficult, especially as a birth doula, having an experience like that. And I'll share this with my daughter's experience as well. But in both situations, my child was taken away from me right after pushing them out. And so in two birth experiences back to back, I didn't have what was called the golden hour. So if you've had a baby, the golden hour is that moment you push that baby out and they put that baby on your chest, and it's that first hour where you get to bond with your baby and you get to establish breastfeeding and all of those things. I didn't get that with both my son and my daughter. That was probably the hardest part for me. was missing that, right? Like when people have birth experiences, especially traumatic ones, there are different aspects of the experience that can be really traumatizing for them. Some people, it's the pushing. For some people, it's, whatever it is, right? For me, the thing that still sits with me to this day and that like still can make me emotional is the fact that I didn't get that golden hour with both of my children. And that's something I still like grieve, like, especially when I'm with a client in the birthing room and they give birth to their baby and they have that golden hour and I'm just like, oh, so beautiful. And I like my eyes tear up a little bit because I'm happy for them. And at the same time, I recognize that like it's a missing part that I just never got with my last two children. But by God's grace, I'm gonna get it. There is going to be a story that is just redemption of my birth experience, and I believe that. But yeah, I wanted to share that with you guys. And like I said, I pray that this maybe encourages someone that had a traumatic experience and maybe needed some encouragement on how to reframe it or see it in a more positive light, or not even in a positive light, because there's no way that you can dim that down, right? When you've had a traumatic experience as such, but maybe just being able to see God's hand in it, looking at it a different way. And so yeah, I pray that this encourages you guys. I'm glad I was finally able to share this birth experience. And if y'all have any questions, especially for people that may watch the playback, definitely leave it in the comments and maybe I'll do a follow-up video and answer some of those questions. I do plan to put out part 2 where I share my daughter's birth experience soon. And again, I have planned to just record this and upload it as a video, but I have no storage on my phone. So I had to do this as a live. But I pray that this blesses you guys and that it encourages anyone that needed some encouragement. So yeah, I pray you guys it's 10:15 here, so I don't know what time it is there, but I hope you guys have a really good night. And for those that hopped on, thank you so much for watching. And for those that watch the playback, I pray that it blesses you as well. See you guys.